In 2016, Dubai was at its glittering peak, a city of wealth, speed, and perfection. But beneath the skyline, families carried secrets that money could not erase. None more so than the Al-Mansoori dynasty, where a 72-hour honeymoon on a private island ended with a bride's body on marble floors and a dynasty's darkest secret exposed. But here's what the headlines never told you. This wasn't a crime of passion. It was the inevitable explosion of a family curse that had been festering for generations. Today's story will destroy everything you think you know about power, purity, and the price of perfection. The Al-Mansoori Tower pierces Dubai's skyline like a golden needle, its gleaming façade reflecting the ambitions of 3 generations. Built on oil money and cemented with political connections, the family's real estate empire spans continents. But money, as Sheikh Salem Al-Mansoori discovered, cannot buy the one thing that matters most to dynastic families: a healthy heir. Salem himself was a walking contradiction. Publicly devout, privately hedonistic. His reputation with foreign women was legendary among Dubai's elite: housekeepers, nannies, anyone who couldn't threaten his social standing. His gold Rolex, worth more than most people's cars, was as much his signature as his predatory smile. The pressure on his only son, Ferris, was suffocating. By 32, Ferris should have produced grandchildren, secured the bloodline, proven himself worthy of inheriting billions. Instead, he had become Dubai society's most whispered about failure. Faris Al-Mansoori looked like everything a sheikh's son should be. 6 feet tall, perfectly groomed beard, designer kandura that cost more than luxury cars. But beneath the handsome exterior, years of medical humiliation had carved deep psychological scars. The fertility clinics in London, Switzerland, America, each visit another confirmation of his fundamental inadequacy. The diagnosis was brutal in its finality: severe oligospermia with virtually zero chance of natural conception. In a culture where virility defined manhood, where children were the ultimate measure of divine blessing, Ferris was marked as cursed. The failed engagements followed like dominoes. The Al-Rashid family's daughter suddenly developed complications after her father learned the truth. The minister's niece discovered an urgent need to study abroad. The oil executive's daughter found religion and decided to dedicate her life to charity work. Each rejection carved deeper into Ferris's psyche, transforming disappointment into paranoia, embarrassment into rage. Dubai's elite whispered behind manicured hands, "Poor boy, can't perform his basic duty. What's the point of all that money if you can't continue the line? His father must be devastated." The gossip followed him into every majlis, every social gathering, every business meeting. Former friends became distant. Invitations dried up. The Golden Prince had become a cautionary tale. Salem's patience finally snapped in late 2015. "Fix this," he commanded his son during a private meeting in his office. "Find a wife who doesn't care about your condition. Find someone desperate enough to accept you as you are. Or find yourself a new family." The ultimatum hung in the air like poison. Ferris understood: marry anyone, or be disowned entirely. That's when Shaira Cruz entered their lives. She had been 23 when she first arrived in Dubai, one of thousands of Filipino domestic workers seeking better lives. Unlike others who cleaned houses or watched children, Sherah possessed something rare: intelligence that couldn't be hidden despite her circumstances. She spoke 4 languages, had studied business in Manila before poverty forced her abroad, and carried herself with quiet dignity that caught attention. She'd worked for the Al-Mansooris for 2 years, initially as a household administrator, too educated for cleaning, too foreign for family status. Her official duties involved managing schedules and correspondence. Her unofficial role was more complex. She became Salem's confidant, someone who understood business and could discuss more than domestic matters. It was during those long evenings when Salem worked late that boundaries blurred. He would ask her opinion on deals, share frustrations about Ferris, complain about social pressures. She listened with intelligence and discretion. When physical comfort followed emotional intimacy, Sherah convinced herself it was opportunity, not exploitation. The photographs she kept were insurance, proof of their connection, evidence that might protect her if things went wrong. Salem's distinctive Rolex gleamed in every image, unmistakable, undeniable proof of their intimate relationship. But Sherah underestimated the Al-Mansoori family's desperation. When Salem suggested his son meet an exceptional young woman in early 2016, Ferris assumed it was another social experiment. When he saw Sherah, beautiful, intelligent, respectfully dressed, he felt the first spark of hope in years. She didn't recoil from his presence. She didn't make excuses. When he awkwardly explained his medical condition during their second meeting, expecting the familiar pattern of rejection, Sherah surprised him. "I want children someday," she said quietly. "But I want a good husband more. A man who respects me, provides for me, treats me with dignity. If Allah wills us to have children, we will find a way. If not, we will build a different kind of happiness." For the first time in years, Ferris felt desired rather than pitied. Here was a woman willing to accept his inadequacy, to overlook his shameful secret. What he didn't realize was that Sherah carried a secret that would destroy them both. A connection to his family that predated their meeting by 2 years. The engagement announcement sent shockwaves through Dubai society. Faris Al-Mansoori, heir to billions, marrying a Filipino domestic worker? The gossip was vicious and immediate. "She's only after the money. He couldn't find anyone else. What will their children look like? At least she might actually give him children, unlike those sterile princesses." But Sherah harbored darker knowledge. She knew about Salem's affairs because she'd been part of them. She knew about the family's financial irregularities because she'd helped manage the paperwork. She knew about Ferris's psychological instability because she'd witnessed his violent outbursts towards staff. What Sherah didn't know was that her past was about to collide with Ferris's future in the most deadly way possible. The photographs hidden on her laptop, the evidence of her relationship with his father, would become the trigger for a tragedy that would destroy them both and expose the rot beneath Dubai's golden façade. The marriage was announced for March 2016. The honeymoon destination, the family's private island. What should have been a beginning would become an ending that would haunt Dubai's elite forever. The engagement announcement hit Dubai society like a social earthquake. Within hours, every WhatsApp group in the city buzzed with the same question. Why would Faris Al-Mansoori marry a Filipino domestic worker? The wedding planning became a carefully choreographed performance. Salem spared no expense. Crystal chandeliers from Italy, roses flown in from Ecuador, gold-threaded fabrics that cost more than most people's annual salaries. But the extravagance couldn't mask the family's desperation. This wasn't a celebration. It was damage control disguised as a party. The guest list told the real story. Dubai's most prominent families suddenly developed urgent overseas business. The Minister of Finance discovered a scheduling conflict. 3 different oil executives found themselves committed to important conferences. Those who did accept invitations whispered behind their programs, "Poor boy couldn't find anyone else. She's pretty enough. But imagine the children. At least she might actually give him an heir." Sherah watched the preparations from inside a golden prison. Salem's wife, Seema, took control of every detail of Sherah's life. Her phone was confiscated for privacy. Her movements were restricted for security. Her Filipino friends were gradually cut off to help her integrate into Emirati culture. The isolation was systematic and complete. "You must understand," Seema explained with cold precision. "You represent our family now. Every word, every gesture, every photo reflects on the Al-Mansoori name. We cannot afford mistakes." But the real psychological warfare was happening behind closed doors. Ferris's behavior during their engagement revealed disturbing patterns that everyone chose to ignore. He would arrive unannounced at the family compound, demanding to see Sherah immediately. His questions started innocently enough, about her childhood, her family, her dreams, but they quickly became invasive. "Who did you talk to in Manila?" he would ask, his voice deceptively calm. "Which men worked in your building? Did any of them ever approach you?" Sherah learned to read the warning signs, the tightening around his eyes when he didn't like an answer, The way his hands would clench when she mentioned male colleagues from her previous jobs. She developed survival strategies, complete compliance, submissive body language, and above all, protecting the one thing that could destroy everything, her laptop. The laptop contained more than just photographs. It held evidence of her business degree, proof of her intelligence, and most dangerously, the images that documented her relationship with Salem. She told herself the photos were insurance, protection against a family known for discarding foreign women when they became inconvenient. Ferris's obsession with her laptop bordered on pathological. "Why do you need privacy from your husband?" he would demand. "What are you hiding from me?" But Sherah held firm, claiming it contained only family photos and personal documents from Manila. Each refusal to share her password drove him deeper into paranoid rage. The fertility discussions consumed their private moments. Faris dragged her to 3 different specialists, demanding tests that confirmed what they already knew. She was perfectly capable of bearing children. His inability became her burden to carry. "The doctors in America have new treatments," he would mutter obsessively. "We'll try everything. You'll give me sons, won't you? You'll make me a real man?" Staff members at the compound witnessed explosive outbursts over trivial matters. A maid accidentally served his coffee too hot. Ferris threw the cup against the wall, screaming about incompetence. A gardener looked at Sherah too directly. Ferris threatened to have him deported. The violence was always controlled, always calculated, never quite crossing lines that would force family intervention. "He's just stressed about the wedding," Salem would explain when reports reached him. "All men get nervous before marriage. He'll settle down." But Salem knew the truth. His son was psychologically fractured, held together by medication and family money. The marriage wasn't about love or even children. It was about preserving the illusion of normalcy for as long as possible. What none of them realized was how perfectly their deceptions aligned with Sherah's own secrets. While Ferris obsessed over her imagined past relationships, the real betrayal sat encrypted on her laptop. While Salem pushed the marriage forward to solve his son's problems, he was orchestrating his own destruction. The photographs told a story that would shatter everything. Salem's distinctive gold Rolex gleaming on his wrist as he held her close. The private moments in his study after late business meetings. The expensive hotel room where he'd taken her to celebrate a successful deal. Each image was carefully composed, deliberately preserved, insurance against a family that consumed women like her and discarded them when convenient. Sherah had loved Salem in her own desperate way. Not romantically, she wasn't naive enough for that. But she'd loved the attention, the respect, the feeling that someone valued her mind as much as her body. When he suggested she meet his son, she'd assumed it was his way of ensuring her permanent place in the family structure. She never imagined Salem was using her to solve his son's psychological crisis. The wedding day arrived with the precision of a military operation. 500 guests filled Dubai's most exclusive hotel ballroom. The ceremony itself was a masterpiece of cultural theater. Ancient traditions performed by people who understood none of their deeper meanings. Sherah wore a gown that cost more than her family's house in Manila, her hands decorated with intricate henna patterns that felt like beautiful chains. Her smile never wavered, even as her hands trembled signing the marriage contract. Ferris played his role perfectly, the grateful groom, finally blessed with a woman willing to accept his shameful inadequacy. The guests whispered throughout the ceremony, "She's lovely, but imagine the scandal. His father must be desperate. At least now the boy might produce an heir." Nobody mentioned the obvious, that this marriage was built on lies, desperation, and mutual exploitation. As the final prayers concluded and the couple posed for photographs, Salem raised his glass in a toast. "To new beginnings," he declared, his gold Rolex catching the light as he gestured. Neither his son nor daughter-in-law could look at that watch without remembering secrets that should have remained buried. The honeymoon departure was choreographed for maximum privacy. The family's private island, 30 miles off Dubai's coast, completely isolated from prying eyes or potential witnesses. No staff, no security, no escape routes. Just a newly married couple and the secrets that would destroy them both. What happened in those first 72 hours would shock even Dubai's most jaded elite. The Al-Mansoori private island sat like a jewel in the Arabian Gulf, 30 miles from Dubai's glittering coastline. White marble villa, infinity pool bleeding into turquoise waters, helicopter pad gleaming in the afternoon sun. Paradise designed for privacy, isolation perfected for the ultra-wealthy. But paradise became prison the moment their helicopter lifted off. The interrogation began before their luggage was unpacked. Ferris stood in the marble foyer, designer suit abandoned for casual clothes that couldn't mask the tension radiating from every muscle. "Now we can finally talk," he said, voice deceptively calm. "Really talk. No family watching, no staff listening. Just us." Sherah felt ice form in her stomach. She'd hoped marriage would calm his paranoia, that consummation would prove her devotion. Instead, isolation had unleashed something darker. "What do you want to know?" she asked, setting down her single suitcase, laptop bag clutched protectively. "Everything." His eyes never left her face. "Every man you've known. Every touch. Every kiss. Every moment of impurity before me. I need to understand what I've married." The questions started gentle, almost conversational. "Tell me about Manila. Which neighborhoods did you live in? Who were your friends?" But within hours, they became scalpels, dissecting every relationship, every interaction with surgical precision. "The security guard at your building. Did he ever look at you inappropriately? The taxi drivers who took you to work. Did any try to touch you? Your supervisor at the office. Surely he made advances." Sherah denied everything, swore her innocence, proclaimed her love. But Ferris had perfected this technique during his failed engagements. He would ask the same questions from different angles, searching for contradictions, building cases against women who had committed no crimes except existing in his presence. By 3 a.m., Sherah's eyes burned with exhaustion. "Please, can we sleep? I'm so tired." But sleep meant vulnerability, meant giving him opportunity to explore her belongings, to find the secrets she guarded. So she sat rigid on their marriage bed, answering questions about men she'd never kissed, relationships that existed only in his paranoid imagination. "You keep saying you love me despite my condition," Ferris whispered, voice venomous in the darkness. "But pity isn't love, is it? You accepted me because no decent man would want a woman like you." The second day brought escalation. Ferris paced the villa like a caged animal, his questions becoming accusations. When Sherah stumbled over details about a former colleague, he exploded. "You're lying. I can see it in your eyes, the way you hesitate. What did he do to you? What did you let him do?" She tried everything. Tears, protestations, even offers of physical intimacy that he rejected with disgust. "Don't try to distract me with your body. That's what women like you do, isn't it? Use sex to control men, to hide your shame." By afternoon, Sherah was trembling with exhaustion. Her hands shook as she clutched her coffee cup, spilling drops on her silk dress. The laptop sat on the bedroom desk like a ticking bomb, its proximity to Ferris making her physically sick with terror. "I need to rest," she finally whispered. "Just an hour, please." She found the sleeping pills in the villa's medical cabinet, heavy-duty medication left for Salem's insomnia during business retreats. 2 tablets knocked her unconscious within minutes, providing blessed escape from Ferris's relentless psychological torture. But unconsciousness meant vulnerability. Ferris stood over his wife's drugged form, watching her chest rise and fall in chemically induced peace. Her laptop sat open beside the bed, password protected but no longer clutched in her desperate grip. For 2 days, he'd watched her guard it like her life depended on its contents. His hands trembled as he typed. Her birthday, her mother's name, the date they met. Nothing worked. Frustration built until he remembered. She'd mentioned her father once, briefly, before changing the subject. Her father's death date, the tragedy that drove her family into poverty. The screen unlocked. Ferris's initial search found nothing suspicious. Work documents from Manila, family photos, email correspondence with her mother. But paranoia had taught him patience. He searched systematically, diving into hidden folders, exploring metadata, following digital breadcrumbs that most people would never notice. The folder was buried deep, innocuously labeled memories. Inside, photographs that stopped his heart. Sherah, younger but unmistakably her, wrapped in the arms of an older man. The setting was clearly the Al-Mansoori compound, his father's study visible in the background. The man's face was partially obscured, but his wrist wasn't. That gold Rolex, distinctive and unmistakable, gleamed in every image like a signature. Ferris scrolled through dozens of photographs, each one more devastating than the last. His wife and his father intimate in ways that shattered every assumption about his marriage, his family, his entire existence. The timestamps revealed the timeline. 2 years ago, long before their engagement, but after she'd entered their household. While Ferris suffered through failed fertility treatments and social humiliation, his father was seducing the woman who would become his son's wife. The betrayal was complete. Not just Sherah's deception, but his father's ultimate humiliation, reducing his son to marrying his cast-off mistress. The woman who claimed to love him despite his inadequacy had already been intimate with the man whose virility constantly overshadowed his failures. Ferris's world didn't crack. It detonated. He closed the laptop carefully, hands moving with mechanical precision. His breathing remained steady, heart rate controlled. But behind his eyes, something fundamental had shifted. The paranoid, insecure man obsessed with his wife's imaginary past had been replaced by something far more dangerous. Dawn was breaking over the Arabian Gulf when Sherah finally stirred, sleeping pills wearing off slowly. She found Ferris sitting in the villa's main room, perfectly dressed, coffee cooling in an untouched cup. "Good morning, wife," he said pleasantly. "I hope you slept well. We have so much to discuss." Something in his tone sent ice through her veins. The laptop sat closed on the table between them, innocuous and terrifying. What do you mean?" "I mean it's time for complete honesty between us. No more games, no more lies." His smile was gentle, almost loving. "I think you know exactly what I mean." Sherah's hand moved instinctively toward her laptop, then froze. Ferris followed her gaze and nodded. "Yes, I've seen them. All of them. The question now is, are you going to tell me the truth voluntarily, or do I need to help you remember how to be honest?" The trap had finally closed. On a private island, with no witnesses and no escape, the secrets that had bound them together were about to tear them apart. The morning sun streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, casting golden light across marble floors that would soon be stained with blood. Ferris sat motionless, his composure terrifying in its completeness. The laptop between them might as well have been a loaded weapon. His first question came like a surgical strike. The laptop screen filled with evidence of her betrayal, intimate photographs that destroyed every lie she'd built their marriage on. His father's distinctive Rolex gleamed in every image like a signature of shame. Sherah's hands trembled as she reached for her coffee. The cup slipped, shattering against marble, brown liquid spreading like spilled secrets. Her world collapsed in real time. Every defense she'd prepared, every story she'd rehearsed, crumbled under the weight of photographic truth. The words ripped from her throat like physical pain. It was Salem. It was his father. Silence stretched between them, thick with implications that would destroy everything. When Ferris finally spoke, his voice carried the hollow echo of a man whose reality had just died. She fell to her knees, words tumbling out in desperate torrents. 2 years ago, before they'd even met properly, she was working for the family, just managing schedules. Salem had been kind, treated her like she mattered. One evening led to another. It wasn't love, it was loneliness, his and hers. It ended months before she and Ferris started talking. But the timeline only made it worse. When Salem suggested she meet his son, he knew exactly what he was orchestrating. The man who'd raised Ferris, who'd pushed him to marry, who'd toasted their union 3 days ago, that same man had already possessed what his son would never have. Ferris stood slowly, pacing the villa like a predator measuring distances. Her explanations became desperate justifications. She'd chosen him, she claimed. After everything with Salem ended, she could have left Dubai, found work elsewhere. But when Ferris spoke to her with respect, treated her like more than just help, she wanted to stay. She wanted to build something real. Real. The word hit him like acid. A marriage built on the lie that she found him acceptable when she'd already sampled what a real Al-Mansoori man could offer. Every moment of their courtship, every gentle word about accepting his condition, had been tainted by her knowledge of what he could never provide. The photographs were security, she claimed. Proof that she'd meant something to someone in the family. Insurance she never intended to use. But Ferris saw only humiliation compounded by pity. The woman claiming to love him despite his inadequacy had already been intimate with the man whose virility constantly overshadowed his failures. His father had seduced her, used her, then orchestrated her marriage to his psychologically damaged son. The perfect circle of humiliation was complete. The laptop exploded against the marble wall, components scattering like shrapnel. Photographs fluttered through the air. Evidence of betrayal made tangible, Salem's face smiling from a dozen compromising angles. Ferris grabbed fistfuls of images, hurling them at her face. Years of medical humiliation, social rejection, and psychological torture crystallized into pure murderous rage. She scrambled backward, terror replacing desperation. Her claims of wanting to love him only deepened his fury. Wanted to love the sterile prince? Wanted to pretend his broken seed was enough after experiencing real manhood? She ran for the villa's main door, but Ferris moved faster. His hand closed on her wrist, spinning her back toward the scattered photographs that documented her betrayal. The isolated villa offered no escape routes, no witnesses, no salvation. Her final words were about choice. Despite everything, she'd chosen him. But Ferris heard only the truth beneath her lies. She'd chosen the safe option. The grateful husband who'd never question her past because he was too ashamed of his own inadequacy. But he wasn't grateful anymore. The violence that followed was swift and methodical. Ferris's rage, suppressed for years behind medication and family expectations, finally found its target. Sherah's attempts to escape were futile in the isolated villa. Her screams echoed across empty water, heard by no one except the man destroying her. Years of fertility treatments, failed engagements, and social humiliation channeled into systematic brutality. This wasn't frenzied passion. It was calculated revenge against every woman who'd ever rejected him, every family that had whispered about his inadequacy, every moment of shame his condition had caused. When silence finally settled over the Al-Mansoori island, dawn was breaking across the Arabian Gulf. Paradise had become a crime scene. The golden heir lay unconscious beside his wife's body, psychological collapse complete. Blood pooled on marble floors while scattered photographs of his father's betrayal fluttered in the morning breeze. The satellite phone's shrill ring eventually penetrated Ferris's catatonic state. Salem's voice crackled through the connection, distant and concerned about a missed check-in call. Ferris stared at Sherah's lifeless form, at the scattered evidence of his father's ultimate betrayal, at the blood on his hands that could never be washed clean. His world had collapsed entirely. The wife who'd pitted him, the father who'd humiliated him, the family dynasty built on lies and corruption. His voice barely functioned when he finally answered. 2 words that would trigger the most expensive cover-up in Dubai's history. He needed help. Salem Al-Mansoori's world collapsed with 2 words crackling through satellite connection. His son's broken voice calling for help from paradise turned crime scene. But beneath the initial shock lay a deeper horror. The photographs scattered across bloody marble meant his own destruction alongside his son's. The emergency response was swift and surgical. Within 4 hours, Dubai's most expensive crisis management team descended on the Al-Mansoori compound. Lawyers worth millions per case, public relations specialists who'd buried scandals for royalty, forensic cleaners who made crime scenes disappear like they'd never existed. The narrative constructed itself with corporate precision. Domestic complications during honeymoon. Tragic accident following emotional argument. Young bride's accidental fall during heated discussion about fertility pressures. No mention of photographs, affairs, or systematic psychological torture. Just another sad story of modern marriage pressures claiming another victim. Ferris was helicoptered to a private psychiatric facility in Switzerland before local authorities could conduct proper interviews. His medical records, sealed under family privacy laws, documented a complete psychotic break requiring immediate intensive treatment. The broken heir would never face questioning about his wife's death. The island crime scene vanished under professional attention. Blood scrubbed from marble floors, broken laptop components removed, scattered photographs incinerated. The villa was repainted, refurnished, transformed back into paradise. Within 72 hours, no physical evidence remained of the horror that had unfolded there. Dubai's police investigation was carefully managed from the beginning. Detective Chief Inspector Ahmed Khouri, a 20-year veteran with gambling debts and alimony payments, found his financial problems mysteriously resolved after submitting his preliminary report. The case file, thin and conclusive, supported the family's narrative completely. The medical examiner's report required more delicate handling. Dr. Sarah Hassan initially documented injuries inconsistent with accidental death, defensive wounds, trauma patterns suggesting systematic violence. But her findings underwent revision after consultations with Dubai's chief medical officer. The final autopsy supported domestic accident theory, with Dr. Hassan accepting an immediate promotion to administrative roles that kept her away from active casework. International pressure proved manageable. The Philippines government, dependent on Dubai's significant investment in Manila infrastructure projects, accepted assurances that justice would be served through appropriate channels. Sherah's family received compensation that transformed their poverty overnight. A house in Manila's best district, education funds for her siblings, medical coverage for her mother's continuing treatment. But money couldn't silence whispers in Dubai's elite circles. The story spread through social networks like digital plague. Faris Al-Mansoori had murdered his foreign bride during their honeymoon. The specifics remained unclear, but the implications were devastating. The family that had ruled Dubai's business elite for decades suddenly found their invitations declining, their calls unreturned, their influence evaporating. Business partnerships dissolved overnight. The Al-Rashid family canceled their joint venture worth hundreds of millions. European investors withdrew from real estate projects citing changed circumstances. Even government contracts, previously guaranteed through family connections, went to competitors with cleaner reputations. Social ostracism followed business isolation. Dubai's most exclusive clubs quietly revoked Salem's memberships. Charity galas found reasons to exclude the family from guest lists. Marriage proposals for remaining family members disappeared completely. The Al-Mansoori name, once synonymous with success and influence, became whispered warnings about unchecked power and inevitable consequences. The truth, fragmented but persistent, spread through domestic worker networks across the Gulf. Sherah had been murdered by a psychologically unstable heir who discovered her past relationship with his father. The photographs, the systematic abuse, the family's complete cover-up, every detail passed between Filipino housekeepers, Indonesian nannies, Sri Lankan drivers who serviced Dubai's elite. Ferris's psychological destruction was complete and irreversible. Swiss psychiatric reports, classified but leaked to family members, described a man whose mind had shattered beyond repair. Catatonic episodes alternated with violent outbursts requiring constant sedation. He spoke to imaginary versions of his father and dead wife, replaying conversations that existed only in his fractured psyche. The relationship between father and son, poisoned by betrayal and complicity, died alongside Sherah. Salem never visited Switzerland, never spoke his son's name again. Ferris had destroyed the woman who could have exposed Salem's affairs, but had also eliminated any possibility of continuing the family bloodline. The dynasty's future died on that marble floor alongside its victim. Salem's guilt manifested in systematic self-destruction. Drinking escalated from social necessity to medical concern. Business decisions became erratic, driven by paranoia rather than profit. He aged decades in months, his playboy confidence replaced by haunted awareness that his indiscretions had triggered murder. The broader consequences rippled beyond family destruction. International relations between UAE and Philippines suffered measurable damage. Filipino domestic workers reported increased harassment and suspicion from employers who viewed them as potential blackmail threats. Dubai's image as cosmopolitan safe haven for foreign workers received lasting damage in Southeast Asian media. Sherah's death became symbolic of systemic vulnerabilities affecting thousands of foreign domestic workers across the Gulf. Her murder, officially minimized as domestic accident, represented the extreme endpoint of exploitation that began with economic desperation and ended in complete powerlessness against entitled wealth. But perhaps the greatest tragedy was how quickly her story faded from public consciousness. Within months, new scandals captured attention. Other families faced different crises. The foreign domestic worker murdered by her employer's psychologically unstable son became footnote in Dubai's endless cycle of wealth, excess, and consequences. The Al-Mansoori empire, built over 3 generations of careful political connections and business acumen, crumbled within 18 months. Salem died of liver failure in 2018, alone in a private hospital room with only paid nurses attending his final moments. The family tower was sold to Chinese investors. The private island was purchased by Russian oligarchs who demolished the villa and built something completely new. Ferris remains in Swiss psychiatric care, funded by rapidly diminishing family trusts. Reports suggest his condition continues deteriorating, his grip on reality permanently severed by the violence he inflicted and the betrayals he discovered. He lives in a world where his father still seduces women while he remains powerless, where his wife's ghost continues accusing him of inadequacy, where the photographs of his ultimate humiliation replay endlessly. The real crime wasn't just murder. It was a system that enabled wealthy men to exploit vulnerable women while protecting them from consequences. Dubai's glittering façade had hidden profound dysfunction, allowing psychological predators to operate with complete impunity until their violence became too obvious to ignore. Today, the Al-Mansoori name exists only in business records and court documents. The dynasty that once seemed untouchable disappeared completely, destroyed by secrets that money couldn't erase and power couldn't protect. In a city built on image and reputation, they learned that some stains penetrate deeper than gold plating can cover. The golden curse had finally claimed its victims, not just the murdered bride, but the family whose corruption had made her death inevitable.